the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
See, it's like, oh, well, Golish is gone. So clearly there's a drop off, and that's why Tennessee's offense isn't scoring at the pace that they were 2 years ago. And last year, Lebby was the target, where it's like, oh, Oklahoma's offense up and down, and he kind of struggles. It was just Lebby was getting a lot of heat. But Lebby has had great offenses just about everywhere he's gone. The guy knows football. The guy knows the state of Mississippi, the South, coached all around the region, obviously, friend of Heupel's and that area. So I'm very interested in terms of how Lebby fits and how it will ultimately work as a big swing back to the Mississippi State of old after the 1 year Zach Arnett experience. But my first question to you, is Lebby a long-term answer for Mississippi State, similar to how Dan Mullen was when he came in? Or do you think this is a couple years thing?
That's the thing with Mississippi State, right? That's a program that when coaches have success there in football, that you're always going to be like, well, they might be looking to make a move to a bigger program. And with Mullen, you face that basically every year he was there after year two. His first year after that, they were like, okay, let's let him get his feet wet a little bit. After State, his second year, they finished in the top 15. It became a yearly thing of you're going to have to face that. So the same will be true of Lebby if he is successful. If let's say State this year is able to get to 6-6 and go back to a bowl game, I think that would be a successful year. If next season he has a great portal class and puts this team at an 8-win status, big jobs are going to come calling. He has the resume as an offensive coordinator. Everywhere he's been, they've put points on the board. He looks the part of a good recruiter. State's recruiting efforts early under him have been pretty good. His name will definitely be thrown out there for some big jobs. The good news for Mississippi State is being a member of the SEC. With the money that entails, State has money to play with. Their collective is in good shape. They can offer. He's making 4.5 now. My guess is State could go up to 8 or 9 by the time you want to go to 8 or 9. I'm not saying next year, but I'm saying if he goes 6-6, 8-4, then let's say they do really well. He goes 9-3 in year 3, and he wants to look at get a $7-8 million salary. State can do that. So they're going to have to fight that battle, obviously, and they do that with every football coach they have that has success. But you just got to make this job as attractive as possible, and I think Mississippi State does a pretty good job at that.
Is he coming in with the same kind of fanfare Mullen had, where that same kind of optimism of the offensive guy who can do more with less? Is it that same kind of feel to you?
There is something to that. With Mullen, he came in after Sylvester Croom had been here for 5 years, and it was 5 years of some of the most putrid offensive football you'll ever see. Yeah. I mean, Croom famously in 5 years never scored 40 points in a game. Never, not one
really?
time. Yeah. And Mullen's first game, they went over 40. And so it was just like, okay, it was like a breath of fresh air. It's only been the 1 year with Arnett last year. Before the year prior, State won 9 games. They finished ranked in the top 20. Now, offensively, they weren't great. And people forget that. Mike Leach's teams here obviously ran the air raid and they piled up a lot of passing yardage. But as far as putting points on the board and being a dynamic offense, they weren't that. But last year was a huge step back. There is some excitement, and there's a whiff of Mullen to all this, even in terms of when Mullen arrived at State that year. Ole Miss was ranked in the top 10 nationally. They were coming off of a Cotton Bowl season. There was a lot of hype around them. Very similar situation with Ole Miss this year. People think that's going to be a playoff team. They probably will be a playoff team when you look at their schedule. So there's some hope that Jeff Lebby can come in here and turn the tide and get Mississippi State back on equal footing, where they haven't been. Even though they won the Egg Bowl 2 seasons ago, Ole Miss as a program has had a little bit more of a national presence than Mississippi State has over the past few years.
Yeah, and it's funny, like Kiffin obviously doing something that hasn't been done ever at Ole Miss, back-to-back 10-win seasons, and he's got this thing humming. And like you said, it looks like they're going to have another 10-win season at Ole Miss. So does that help or hurt Jeff Lebby in this early part of his tenure, that Ole Miss is already cooking and that fans understand that, like, hey, Ole Miss is in a different place than Mississippi State is right now? Or are they like, hey, we need to catch Ole Miss because we've watched Lane Kiffin dominate this state for the last 3 years?
It very much is the latter there. That Mississippi State fans aren't going to settle for being second best to Ole Miss.
Yeah.
And Dan Mullen understood that when he arrived. The first thing he did was talk about the rivalry and how we got to be the number one team in the state. I say this a lot, that because you get some Ole Miss fans who say, there's not that the rivalry is not that big a deal. You can't be number one in the nation if you're not number one in the state, and that's how I look at things. So if you're not the best, look at Auburn.
Yeah.
They can't be the number one team in the nation when they're not the number one team in the state. So for Mississippi State fans, I think by and large there's an air of patience this year, right? Everybody knows that Ole Miss is loaded. They had a huge transfer portal class. They bring back Jackson Dart and a lot of those players. And Kiffin has been there for 5 years. He's built that program up. He's got them going in the right direction. Your hope is that in year one you can take a small step forward. You can be competitive with everybody in the SEC, that you can show that offensively you're going to be what Jeff Lebby has been at every other stop. You don't want to have him come in and State winning games on defense. I always thought that was one of the issues with Leach, and why people were slow to embrace him sometimes, was that when you hire Mike Leach, you think, okay, well, they'll lose some games, but they'll lose 45-42. And State was losing games like 21-3 in his first year. And that's not what you expect when you hire an offensive coach. In year two, you want to see State take a big step forward. Ole Miss next season, if we're going to look way ahead, should take a step back. They're going to lose Dart. They're going to lose a lot of their skill position guys. A lot of their transfers are seniors and 1 year guys. So next year they should take a step back to be a 7-8 win team, and you hope in that year maybe you can catch up with them a little bit. This year, if you're caught up with Ole Miss, it's going to be really disappointing in Oxford and really exciting in Starkville. But I will say this: last year State was terrible. That's the best Ole Miss team in maybe ever. Yeah, and they only beat State by 10 here in Starkville in a game that was it was 10-7 going into the fourth quarter. So
missed field goals changed some stuff there too. Yeah,
maybe the two teams aren't that as far away as perception would make you think. But that being said, I think in year one it really is sort of baby steps. Get back to a bowl game for Mississippi State. That's the goal. That seems realistic.
What have you heard from fans is the most exciting part of the hire for Lebby?
The offense. I mean, Mississippi State has just never been a program that's put spectacular offense out there. Mullen, when he arrived.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.